Amichai Stout from the Jewish Federation of Greater Toledo is my guest today. This is the next episode in my series of interviews with faith community leaders. You probably know that in Perrysburg there are no synagogues, but of course we still have Jewish individuals in our town. So this episode is meant to be a resource for current and future Perrysburg residents who are either Jewish or would like to learn more about the Jewish Federation of Greater Toledo. Welcome to the Perrysburg Podcast, episode 86. I'm your host, Perrysburg resident Kim Newlove. The Perrysburg Podcast is an informational podcast for prospective, new, and current Perrysburg, Ohio residents. We talk about what's in Perrysburg and why people like to live here. Our website is perrysburgpodcast.com. In today's episode, Amichai will introduce himself, talk about his role, highlight the various synagogues in the Toledo area, mention some programs, resources, upcoming events, volunteer opportunities, and interfaith collaboration, ways to connect, and more. We cover a lot in our half-hour interview. Now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Amichai Stout. Hi, Amichai. Welcome to the Perrysburg Podcast. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing? Thank you for having me.
I'm great. It's a beautiful March day here in Perrysburg, Ohio.
It is. I was very excited to see the weather today. Is going to be a high of 63, I think, in Sylvania. So
yep,
very excited.
That Ohio weather, some days it's still winter, some days it's spring. But anyways, I'm glad to have you on the show today. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Amichai Stout. I am the director of the Jewish Community Relations Council for the Jewish Federation of Greater Toledo. That is a mouthful, but what it basically means is I am the first point of contact for community groups, for interfaith dialogue, for government officials, elected and non-elected. Basically, anyone who wants information or to forge a relationship with the Jewish Federation of Greater Toledo, I'm kind of the face. So they'll put me up on the podcast, they'll put me up on the local news stations, and my job is to represent the interests of all the Jews in the Greater Toledo area.
Got it. I am talking to the right person. When I saw your email signature, it said Director, Jewish Community Relations Council. So I really figured you would be a good voice for the Jewish community in Northwest Ohio. I know that here in Perrysburg, we don't have any synagogues. So I wanted to make sure that I invited you to be a resource to anybody looking to move here,
Sure.
Anybody already here, or maybe people who are already living in Perrysburg and just don't know much about the Jewish community in Northwest Ohio. Could you talk a little bit about not just what you do, but where you worship?
A lot of what I do on a day-to-day basis, and I really enjoy this position because every day is different. So some days it's event planning, which means I'm sitting at my desk and I'm sending a lot of emails and trying to coordinate with all the right people. Some days it's like today where I get to grab my coffee and come out and do interviews or take meetings with different community folks. But I would say I'm in the people business and I'm in the bridge building business. So there are very few people that I will not talk to. I can't think of any off the top of my head. So if you're willing to come to the table in good faith, I'm willing to treat you to coffee and talk about shared interests between the Jewish community and, say, the Muslim community, between different church groups, between different community organizations, social justice organizations. We do a lot of work with Equality Toledo. So that's basically the job part. And then in my personal life, as a religious Jew, I actually, when I do go to synagogue, I go to our Chabad house, which is a more Orthodox style worship center in Sylvania. But there's something for everyone. We have a conservative synagogue, which we call it big C conservative, not small c conservative, because it means that it's a middle ground between Orthodox and Reform. It doesn't mean it's politically conservative. It just means they want to conserve Jewish tradition while being open-minded and forward-thinking. We also have a Reform synagogue. That's the biggest one in Greater Toledo. I believe it's 80% of the Jews who are religiously active in Toledo belong to the Reform Temple. And then there is an Orthodox shul that meets once a month. They bring in a really nice rabbi from West Virginia, actually, to lead services. So there's something for everyone. You will not be disappointed if you're looking for a place to worship.
Thank you for talking about that. You mentioned Sylvania.
Yeah.
I started raising my family in Toledo,
Okay.
actually, near the
Yeah.
University of Toledo. And that's where at the Jewish Community Center there, instead of a YMCA, it's the Jewish
Yes.
Community Center that's kind of on the campus of where a lot of the synagogues
Yeah.
are. Yeah, that's how I kind of got to know where the synagogues are
Yep.
in the Toledo area. Are all three that you just mentioned right there on that campus? Because I think I remember one being on Woodley too.
Yes. So the Orthodox synagogue is on Woodley. The Reform is right next door to the JCC campus, which is also the Federation home base. And then the Conservative shul is behind the Federation JCC. And then the Chabad house is just down on King Road.
Oh,
So
okay.
I think it technically has a Toledo address, but it's like a 2-minute drive from my apartment in Sylvania. So it's not far at all.
It's probably Sylvania Township, maybe.
I think so, maybe, yeah.
But it has a Toledo address. I know that area.
Yeah. It's south of the Mire.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it's about a 35-minute walk. So my wife and I are Orthodox, so we walk on Shabbat. So we don't go as often as we should because it's a long walk and it's cold. Well, it has been cold. Maybe we'll start walking again.
Yeah, today might be a very good day. And on what days are your typical worship service?
So yes, so they are generally on Saturday mornings. Some synagogues will offer something on Friday night as well to welcome in Shabbat. But the Reform and the Conservative synagogue generally have a service every Saturday morning. I think there's maybe one Saturday a month the Reform shul does not have a service, but then the Chabad house also has services every Saturday. So again, you can usually find what you're looking for during the month, and then the Orthodox shul will kind of post a few weeks in advance when they're having the rabbi come in, but it's usually near the end of the month.
Okay. Where can somebody go to find out more information?
They can go to our website, www.jewishtoledo.org. So we do have a lot of resources. If you're newish and Jewish, we like to say, or if you're not so newish, but you're plenty Jewish, we have a lot of different programs. I will say that it tends to be tailored more towards older folk, but that's just because it's an aging population here. But that's not to say there aren't programs for young people. I would say the majority of people that we serve are elders, but we have a next gen group for young Jews. We have a young professionals group that meets probably once every month or every 6 weeks. We have programming for young families, resources for young families with children. The Federation actually runs with the Chabad house a preschool on the JCC campus. And in addition to that, we also have religious schools at the Conservative and the Reform synagogues. Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff and a lot of resources for people with kids, young families, as well as older folks, people who are my age, everything.
When you say they're my age, I mean, I'm 46. How old can you be? You look like you're under 40.
I am 29. I hesitate because I just had a birthday, so I'm used to saying 28, and my wife will not let me forget that I'm in my 30th year of life, and she likes to poke fun at that. So, yeah. So, but I think I emphasize that because they're the kind of like young professional cohort is very small. There are not many people who are probably between the ages of 25 and 40. And so that's kind of like a segment of the population that if you're around, we would love to meet you. We would love you to come out of the woodwork and join us for programs. And it's more than just social programs, right? So in my work as JCRC director, I do a lot of Jewish advocacy and educational programming. So earlier in the year, I was doing fireside chats, which were once every month. I was doing like a talk at night about a topic related to Judaism or related to Israel, just to provide a little bit of context for people who might not know as much or who wanted a maybe more in-depth look at some of the issues facing the Jewish community in Israel nowadays. We also do a lot of interfaith program, like I said. So we have a model Seder coming up that's open to the community. So anyone who has been curious about what do Jews actually do for Passover and what is a Seder like, we're doing a model Seder. So it's going to be a very traditional experience. It's not going to be a full Seder, not a full dinner by any means, but we'll have some of the classic hits from your Bubby's Seder table, and we'll allow people to have a good experience where they can really see what it's like for religious Jews and for non-religious Jews. A lot of Jews will do a Seder even if they're not religious.
Okay, what is a Seder meal for anybody listening that
Sure.
doesn't know what the food is?
Yes, so traditionally it starts You're supposed to eat something bitter to remember slavery in Egypt. So usually this is you do matzah, and then you do lettuce, and then you do horseradish, and then you make a sandwich out of it. It's a whole thing, and we'll explain where that tradition comes from at a model Seder. But then when you get to the dinner part, which is after the very long religious ritual that accompanies the Seder, usually you're looking at some really nice gefilte fish, some matzo ball soup, probably some chicken. It can get a little hard to find some of the normal things you might eat for dinner, because in addition to not eating bread during Passover, religious Jews will not eat this group of foods called kitniot, which usually includes beans and legumes and peanuts, corn. So you won't find any corn on the cob. I believe you'll probably find mashed potatoes, some chicken. Fish is usually a key one. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for talking about that. I don't think I've ever had gefilte fish, but I love that word because I think I've heard it on, believe it or not, Saturday Night Live.
Oh, okay.
Do you know who I'm talking about? There was this, oh man, you're too young. You wouldn't know. There was this woman, and Coffee Talk, I think was the name of the skit. And yeah, every once in a while she'd stick in some Yiddish and she'd say a few words. And
gefilte was one of those words.
I think gefilte fish was in there somewhere. Not making fun. I'm just saying that is my point of reference.
If you knew what gefilte fish was, you would make fun, and we're okay with it. It's if it's done correctly, it's very delicious. If it's bought jarred and pickled, it's not so great, but it's a very nostalgic thing for a lot of people. So even though we all kind of agree that the jarred gefilte fish that you can find at the kosher aisle at your local grocery store is not great, some people have a deep, maybe it's a traumatic attachment, but they do have an attachment to it.
Yeah, they have a connection to it, a memory with it.
Yes. And memory is very foundational to the Jewish experience. So we cannot fault anyone for liking jarred gefilte fish. It's not my taste, though.
Well, how can somebody find out more about this Seder meal?
Yeah, so they can either reach out to me directly. My email is Amichai. I'll spell that because I know that is very difficult. It's AMICHAI @jewishtoledo.org. I can provide any kind of information about the Seder that they might need. I believe it's on Sunday, the 23rd of March, and signups are open until the 17th. So I don't know when this is airing. So maybe if that's...
I believe it will actually come out on Friday, the 14th of March.
Great.
So it's perfect timing.
Then they have 3 days, and we can move the date around a little bit when people need to get in by. We just need to know exactly how much food we need to prepare. But yeah, we would love to have people who are curious, people who are Jewish and non-Jewish. Some people just like to have the Seder so much they'll come for a pre-Passover Seder, but a lot of times we find that it's a really meaningful way for non-Jews to experience our holiday and to learn about us. And we find that it's also very meaningful for Christians too, because the very close relationship that Judaism and Christianity have, that sometimes it helps them to understand their own practice better when they can kind of look and see. It's one thing to read about it in the Bible, right, but it's another thing to actually experience it and kind of see how the Jewish interpretation differs from the Christian interpretation.
Right on. Yes, I'll have to tell my pastor about this because he typically creates a meal for us. It's a Seder meal, but I can't remember what he serves. Honestly, I don't think I usually go to it because we actually have a son with autism and he's a super picky eater.
Yeah.
And I honestly couldn't see him consuming gefilte fish, to be honest.
Yeah, that's totally
but
fair.
Who knows? Maybe we'll try.
Well, if you would like to come, or if you would like to extend the invite to your pastor, you are all always welcome at any kind of Jewish Toledo event.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
I appreciate you extending that invitation.
Yeah.
Sincerely. Back to the young people stuff. I wanted to say that back when I was raising my kids in the Toledo area, before we moved here to Perrysburg, we had friends who were Jewish, and they sent their kids to the Jewish school. Do they still have that there right beside the JCC?
We do not. I believe it closed in 2008, so actually quite some time ago, but you will still find, there are people who are younger than me who remember going to that school.
It was David something, right?
David Stone?
Might have been.
I think it was Stone. I know, I should know this, but
that's all right.
I've only been in this position for 10 months, and I moved here from Philadelphia, so I think I can be forgiven for it.
I forgive you for that. I was just curious if it was still open.
No,
I think they called it Hebrew school, didn't they?
Yeah, it's the Hebrew Day School. So we have, like I said, we have the we have the preschool with Chabad that the Federation runs. But as far as like a formal Jewish day school, it closed a while ago.
All right. And what kind of integration do you have with the JCC? I mean, do you do anything with them? I just mentioned that the David Stone School was kind of connected to the Jewish Community Center. What activities do you share there with the JCC?
Yeah, so that's another interesting story. So it's actually a JCC YMCA,
Right.
and so we kind of have like like a mutual agreement with them that they kept the JCC name, but for all intents and purposes, it's a YMCA. So they run all the rec facilities, but they allow our offices to stay there. I would say most programming that the Federation does is usually off campus, not too far. It's usually at the Reform Temple or it's at the Conservative Synagogue. But we do have some buildings up at the front where our junior, senior family and social services are located. And a lot of times we'll do smaller scale events there. We actually just had an event with our Baha'i community celebrating one of their holy days with them that we had at the, we call it the Sekich building. It was named after the Sekich family from Jewish Toledo. And yeah, so we opened up the space to them, and I think we had about 40 people there. We had some dinner, some singing, some presentations. So it's a really Hamishy space, that's a Yiddish for like kind of homey, warm, and welcoming. So we try to make it as Hamish as possible, and it's a pretty unique multi-use space. You can do a lot with it.
Nice. I think that whole campus, I call it a campus.
It is.
It's really neat.
It is a campus. Yeah, it's very cool because you usually don't have to go far when we have programming. I think maybe the furthest we've ventured out is our film festival last year. They did at Northview or Southview High School. I can't remember. But again, that's also not super far from our campus. But usually it's if you know where the Federation is and you know where the synagogues are, you'll be able to find your way to a program that we're running.
Yeah, it sounds like it's all kind of right there on that Sylvania Avenue, McCord Road kind of area.
Yep, right about there. Yep.
Right. Yeah. Now, as somebody who had a YMCA membership as a Toledo resident, and now, of course, goes to the Perrysburg Y all the time, the Fort Meigs YMCA, we just would distinguish between that West Toledo YMCA and the YMCA JCC combo by just calling it the JCC. I just want to give you some of my history because I know you said you're kind of new to the area.
A lot of our community members will still call it the J.
Yeah, exactly.
So
just one letter.
It warms my heart, right? It's like, it's still the J. Yeah.
Yes.
I actually we actually still pay dues to the JCC Association of North America. So my boss and I actually just got back from a conference for JCC professionals. So I think that's maybe one of the unique things about us as a federation is because we still are part of that JCC system. I think it comes out in the fact that I think we do more programming than your traditional Jewish federation would do. I think in other areas, the federation usually kind of has a tendency to be maybe more oriented towards charity or fundraising or political advocacy. And that's not to say that we don't do that. We definitely do, but we make it a point to provide programming to kind of create a communal space. And I think that's something unique that we can do because we have that history as a JCC and because we still try to maintain that culture.
Well, I think you can't fight the geography too, because it's all right there.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Which is a good thing, I think.
I think so.
Yeah, you can use it for advantage.
It's your one-stop shop.
Yeah, kind of is. Now, as a Perrysburg resident, I'm not Jewish, but if anybody wants to learn things about the Jewish community in Northwest Ohio that they, as a Jewish individual living in Perrysburg, did not know before, what kind of resources would you recommend for them?
Yeah, I would recommend they get in touch with us. I think you can find a lot of stuff online. So the synagogues each have their own websites. Again, we have our Jewish Federation website. I think the other thing is if you know someone who's Jewish, if you're non-Jewish, don't be afraid to ask questions. We are happy to talk about just about anything. And ask a couple because there's an old saying, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. So,
I don't know that one.
Oh, that's a classic. No, I think talking to Jewish friends and Jewish neighbors, I know we're kind of spread out here, but I think there's more Jews in the area than people realize, but as a Jew, it feels smaller. But so there's 2,200 Jews in Greater Toledo, so in our catchment area. And I would say about a quarter of them are probably regularly engaged. So I'm talking either regular attendance at our programs or regular attendance at a local synagogue, or they have their kids in one of the religious schools on like Sunday mornings and during the week. So I think if you do know someone who's Jewish, I would say you've got a pretty good chance that they're involved. And if you ask them how you could get more involved or how you could learn more, they're always happy to talk. We do a lot of, so we have our programming at the Federation, but the synagogues also do their own programming. They have adult education classes. They have special events going on throughout the year. I think that all the synagogues I think Federation's in on it too. We're having a Purim carnival coming up soon. So Purim is a Jewish holiday. It's actually this Friday. So I believe the carnival is, I think it's this weekend. I really should know that.
That's all right. I think they could go to the website to learn more, right?
They 100% can. And we also have an online newspaper. We do have a print version of it too, but you can also find it online on our website, the Toledo Jewish News, and that's usually a good look ahead for the next month or two. So it'll usually come out at the end of, so like the April version will come out probably the last week of March, and then that'll have programming and information on events from like all through April and maybe a little bit of May, depending on how ambitious you are and getting your programming planned. In the community relations sphere, it's a little harder to plan ahead because we're kind of constantly faced with a changing environment.
Well, sure. It's hard for any newspaper to put the events in there because unless people come to you, you have to kind of do your own research and find out. You're talking about the newspaper, right?
Yeah.
I get it. Well, I like that you talked about old-fashioned networking, asking people who are Jewish, like, what are you up to and what are you connected with? And the newspaper is a good resource. I was thinking you might point to social media. Is there anything social media-wise that you would like to promote?
So that's my bad. We have a wonderful social media professional, Abby, who runs a fantastic Facebook page for our federation. She also runs our Instagram. I think we might have a Twitter or an X or whatever you call it nowadays. I'm actually really not on social media, so I kind of forget that it's a resource, but we do have a really great Facebook page. And you can not only see what's coming up and you can check out our events there, but if you are curious as to if our events look fun, you can go through and look at the pictures that we post. So every time we have a really big event, we'll post pictures. Abby takes care of all of that. And I can confirm they do look as fun as they are. So I actually just saw one this morning when I was checking my phone. We had our International Women's Day event yesterday. We had 100 people there, and it was sponsored by all the synagogues and federations. So and I was looking at the pictures, and I was pretty impressed.
Well, good. Good. I'm glad that you have the social media presence because it seems like everybody's so distracted these days. You got to be where people are already looking, right?
100%. Yeah. It's we try our best, and I think we do a lot better on Facebook because, like I said, like we have a population that trends a little bit older. So, but we do, again, for the young people, we have the Instagram and I think they post on the Instagram stories. Again, I don't have an Instagram. I haven't been on Instagram since I was in college.
My parents didn't join Instagram until my sister took a Fulbright scholarship and she was abroad and they wanted to see all these cool places that she was traveling. She was in Germany for a year and they wanted to see everything.
Yeah.
So I think you have to be kind of motivated to get on more than one platform. I know what it's like. I really do.
Yeah.
And you're talking about older people liking Facebook. Yeah, guilty. But I didn't even get on Facebook until I was your age, until I was like 29, 30-ish.
My parents are on Facebook. I think my dad has an Instagram. I don't think my mom knows what Instagram is. So we try to keep it basic in my household.
That's all right. That's all right. To each their own.
Yes.
But I appreciate you talking about the resources and your team. Is there anybody else on your team that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Everybody. So we actually, you would be surprised. I think we have, my boss was just talking about this at our conference. I think we have 35 employees at the Jewish Federation, which is a pretty robust team for a, kind of a small community organization. My partner in crime is named Mary Billiou. She's our community relations programming specialist. She used to work at the Toledo Blade as the food editor. So if you ever want some good Jewish recipes, you can look in our newspaper and she kind of will do little articles on Jewish food recipes. And she's very interested in cultural education and exposing people to not just what you would think of as stereotypical Ashkenazi European Jewry, but she's also very into highlighting our Sephardic or Middle Eastern Jewish communities as well, and their cuisines and their culture. So she works very closely with our Jewish Family and Social Services team. So we have two social workers on staff. We have a full-time food pantry. So the team with our social services is fantastic. We also have a really fun and robust programming staff. So our VP of Programming and Innovation, Hallie Freed, does a really good job of managing a team of people to provide all of that wonderful programming I was talking about from cradle to grave, from our youngest and newest members who are young and growing to our very seasoned older members who are still very passionate about living a full Jewish life. So yeah, I would not be able to name all 35 of them. We'd be here forever, but we do have some really great people on staff.
Thank you for giving a shout out to those who are on your team. I think teams are so important. Now, one of my personal interests is in volunteer activities. Do you have volunteer activities that you would like to recruit for at this time? Go
I
ahead.
am so glad you asked because yes, all the time, always. So our biggest one, like I mentioned, is our food pantry. We need some help with our food pantry as far as people who are able and willing to do shopping during the week. So if you have a few free hours and can kind of commit maybe long term to doing shopping, I believe it's every Monday. Local grocery stores, we will train you. We will, give you the funds to be able to make these trips. But that's usually a big one. Stocking the food pantry as well, and maybe doing a little bit of organizing. And then throughout the year, we'll have different. So, like last year, we did a faith build with Habitat for Humanity. We're trying to see if we're going to be able to do that again this year. But yeah, there are definitely opportunities to get involved and to volunteer. We will never say no to help. The more help we have, the more that we can provide for our community.
Awesome. I love that. And you talked earlier about doing interfaith things.
Yes.
So, do you welcome people from other faiths to help with your food pantry or volunteer activities?
Yes, we have talked to a lot of. So, what I've actually found is that sometimes churches will have the manpower, but they don't necessarily have the resources or the space to be providing. Like, not every church has a food pantry, and that's okay. But they have a lot of people who will go and work at food pantries, or they have they have a ready and willing crew, but they just don't have any programming of their own. We've been approached. We have approached churches, so we are very much willing to give people an opportunity to serve. We are, like I said kind of earlier, I'm happy to meet anyone for coffee. So I actually saw when you had reached out that you had interviewed Pastor Melanie from Zoar Church.
Yes.
She's great. She and I have gotten coffee, so we keep in touch about events that I saw this, you might be interested in that. So we're really good with that. And I work a lot with Equality Toledo interfaith work with her because I believe she's on the board for Equality Toledo, and she's specifically for the Pride Faith Initiative. So we do work with that. Yeah, we're willing and ready to partner with anyone. We have a very big heart for our Baha'i community too. So we like to work with them on a lot of different things. And then if you were privy to Neighbor Toledo and all those, Perrysburg,
No,
right? So in Toledo, in the more immediate suburbs, there was an organization called Neighbor to Neighbor, and they're still around. But it was spearheaded by Reverend Gale at St. Michael's in the Hills Episcopalian Church in Ottawa Hills. And it was basically a election year initiative where there was a recognition that things are a little tense in America. And so they created some neutrally colored signs. They were pink and green. No confusion about political parties there. Very, very neutral colors. And the idea was, can you put up a sign that says "Heart Your Neighbor" in your yard, even if your neighbor has, maybe the opposite political sign that you would put up? So
I have seen those.
yes. So that was an initiative spearheaded by them. Big interfaith, big civic community organization kind of collaboration. We did some work with them on that, and we are continuing to stay in touch with them as they continue to provide programming. But it's not an election year, so they're trying to maybe inspire more small acts of kindness as opposed to broader discourse about not hating each other. Is that I think a very blunt way to put it.
I like direct.
Yes.
That's all right. Shoot straight, my friend.
Yeah.
Shoot straight. When I lived in Toledo, there was always an interfaith blood drive. Do you guys help with that at all? Is that part of the interfaith activities that you do? Would you like to talk about that?
Yes. So actually, we have a community member named Zoar who is very passionate about this. This is her raison d'etre, her reason, French for reason to be. But it's one of the things that she's very passionate about. She does a lot of work with the multi-faith council, and part of that is the interfaith blood drive. So yes, I think she does it more through the temple, and not directly through federation, but it's definitely something we're aware of, and we 100% support her efforts to
promote that.
Yes, thank you.
That's all right. I think the more that we talk about things that we feel the same about, that we care about, the more we realize that we're not really that different. It's just, it's a different faith.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's something that we have really been focused on, trying to show up more in that, not that we were not trying to show up, but I think there's, especially in the last 16, 17, 18 months, there's been this realization that a lot of issues can be resolved with education, and a lot of it can be resolved by showing up and presenting your side of things, and by showing people that at the end of the day, we all want the same thing: good jobs, security for our communities, a safe place to raise a family, maybe 2 nice vacations a year. Maybe that's pushing it. But it's very important to us from a religious perspective to be involved in social justice, in community betterment. And I think, especially with everything that's going on, and I won't get political, but just with everything going on in Israel, with the war and everything, sometimes that gets lost. Sometimes that idea that your Jewish neighbors are just neighbors who happen to pray differently, that can get lost. And so it's really important for us to show up, have difficult conversations if need be, to kind of remind everyone that we're not so different.
Well said. Amichai, thank you so much for being with me here on the Perrysburg podcast. As we wrap this up, is there any last call to action? Anything else you'd like to say?
If you're interested in learning more, or if you're in a position with a community organization and you want to extend a warm hand to the Jewish community and see how our shared priorities might align and how we can collaborate, send me an email. I will buy you coffee, and I will meet you at any coffee shop at your convenience. So I'm always happy to have these conversations. Thank you so much for this opportunity for me to come and represent Jewish Toledo. We really do have a great community. We're small, but we're mighty, and we're very proud of who we are and the work that we do. And so we would love to work with anyone who wants to work with us.
Thank you so much for being here on the Perrysburg podcast.
Take care. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks again to Amichai Stout for being my guest today. He is a great resource for the Perrysburg community and the Toledo area as well. I actually first heard about the Jewish Federation of Greater Toledo just this year in January 2025, when I read an article in the Toledo Blade, one of our great local newspapers. The title of the article was "Wood County Teacher Wins Award for Holocaust Education Efforts." I've got a link to that article in the show notes. You can find those on perrysburgpodcast.com. The article says, for her efforts in Holocaust education and advocating for inclusion, Elmwood High School teacher Heidi Meyer was one of 19 individuals nationwide to be awarded the Shine a Light on Anti-Semitism Civic Courage Award by the Jewish Education Project in partnership with the Shine a Light on Anti-Semitism campaign. Way to go, Heidi, and thank you to Sarah. I think her last name is Reedon, Readdean. Sarah Reedon. Thank you, Sarah, for writing that article for The Blade, and congratulations to Heidi Meyer, who teaches history and government at Elmwood High School. Teachers, you never know when something you do will have an impact on others. That article had an impact on me. That is how I found out about the Jewish Federation of Greater Toledo. So thank you again to Heidi. On a different topic, that Seder meal has been on my mind this week. So as a follow-up about that and an FYI to you, I emailed my pastor, Pastor Mark Wentz at Lutheran Church of the Master, about the Seder meal, which is on Sunday, March 23rd. Then I RSVP'd for it. I will be going to that event. If you or your faith community leader might be interested as well, you'll find the details to RSVP in the show notes on perrysburgpodcast.com. It's time to wrap this episode up. If you are a current or future Perrysburg, Ohio resident looking for a place to worship and you are Jewish, check out the resources listed in the show notes or get in touch with Amichai. His email address is in the show notes as well. Thank you for listening to episode 86 of the Perrysburg podcast. If you know someone who might like this episode, please share it with them. And if you like this podcast, come on back. We've got lots more coming out in 2025. Subscribe to or follow the Perrysburg podcast on your favorite podcast player and YouTube to get each new episode right when it comes out. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I will talk to you next week.